It is always my practice to jump right into a lesson and to leave other things for another time. But tonight, I am going to give myself permission to abort that for a moment. I had a marvelous time sitting in my living room and watching a video that my daughter made for me. Some of you took great pride in highlighting, exaggerating, and poking fun at the age of 60. I want you to know I appreciate every single thing more than you'll ever know. I also want you to know that this broken down old look is mostly your fault. So, there you go. So I was able to turn it right back in there. That's how we do it. And James reminded me just now, I was in a meeting down in Corbin. It happened also when I was with Dave May last year in Mississippi, which, by the way, next Sunday I'm going back down there to preach for them. The loneliest, most overlooked thing in churches of Christ. You know what that is? The third verse of a 4-verse song. I don't know why, but we always miss the third one. I don't know what I think it's because sermons are supposed to have 3 points, songs are supposed to have 3 verses. Because every time we sing a 2-verse song, we always sing it again. So that's what it must be. That's the only thing I can figure out. All right, let's get into the more serious things. A week or two ago, and when Mike Dye said in prayer, we pray for a moral revolution. It set my mind in gear. And this morning we talked about the need of a moral revolution because God has shown us what is good. Now tonight we need to say, and this is what I want us to close with, the moral of my story. The moral of the story, as you know, we use that phrase because what we mean is when you tell a story, then the moral is, what is the lesson I'm supposed to learn from that story? Now, you can tell a great story with action-packed events and all kinds of wonderful things and leave it right there. It'll be interesting, but it's more like an action movie. You're just there to enjoy the moment, and you leave it there. But if you really want it to be valuable, you take that action-packed, filled story and you say, now this is what we're supposed to learn. Here is the moral of the story. Every preacher or teacher should have the experience that I have on a weekly basis, because it will not only remind you of what your job is, it will also inspire you and give you a pat on the back. When I tell Bible stories, action-filled, to these kids in preschool sitting right down here, it is amazing what is going on. It is amazing. The stories, when you tell them in full of action, they are right there. The stories we've all known for all of our lives, they're fresh and new and wonderful, and their eyes are wide open and their mouths drop and they respond and back and forth. And we could have fun with that, but then we always close and say, now what are we supposed to learn? Well, this is what we learn. That's what makes it valuable. I was thinking of a way to illustrate it in a live fashion. My parents were here this weekend, and when they're around, I'm always remembering things, probably like you do. My dad coached my baseball team. I was 9, 10, somewhere along there. And my dad wanted to teach me something. And here's the story. I just lay the story out. I hit the ball. And he ran up to the batter's box, grabbed the back of my pants, lifted me up so that my toes were barely touching the ground, and made me get to first. There's the story. And you go, okay, so what? Right. That's why you got to have a moral. The moral was, son, you're not hustling. You're not trying hard enough. The moral of the story is, get moving. Work hard. Really go at it. Or somebody might grab you by the back of the pants and jerk you down there. See, the story takes on a totally different feel. Tonight, let's look at the moral of my story. And as you read the title, it's the moral of your story. But it begins in the book of Micah with the background, the moral, the message that is behind the moral. What's going on in Micah? I want quickly for you to turn to that book with me and notice just a few things in the book where he can tell us the story. This is the action. Here's what's happening. This is what's going on in Israel, what's going on in Judah. And Micah is right in the middle of it. Now, I was reading today that Micah was a country prophet, not a city guy. And he was simply talking to people who every day went to their farms or went to their gardens or did the vineyards. And those are the people he talked to. He wasn't talking to the rich over there in that city, but he's really concerned about these farmers. And they had a wealth of their own, but they are an agrarian group, and that's what he's concerned about. He says in this text that here are some problems in Micah's time. Here are the problems that are taking place in this agrarian country. What's happening? What kind of people are they? Well, there are a number of passages that we could look at in the book, a number of things that relate. Look at chapter 2, for instance. Woe to those who devise iniquity and work out evil on their beds. At morning light they practice it. Because it is in the power of their hand, they covet fields and take them by violence, houses and seize them. They oppress a man in his house, a man in his inheritance. They go after things because they can. They have the power to do it, and therefore they do it. Look at chapter 3, verse 2. You who hate good and love evil. And then he talks about how you eat the flesh of my people. You flay their skin, break their bones, chop them in pieces. This is a story of action. Chapter 7, verse 2. The faithful man has perished from the earth. Nobody is right anymore. He's gone. No one is upright. They lie in wait for blood. Every man hunts his brother with a net. Chapter 3, verse 11. The heads judge for a bribe. The priests teach for pay. The prophets divine for money. This is what's going on. Would you like to live in that place? Where people take advantage of others and try to root them off of their land so they can have it because they have the power. And then they have the force of the judge and the priest and the prophet behind them because all of them are out for the money. And everything they're doing is for that very purpose. But here's the problem. Here is the story. Here's what's going on. Look at chapter 3, verse 11 at the end. After all this stuff, yet they lean on the Lord and say, "Is not the Lord among us? No harm can come upon us." What's the problem? The problem is that all of these people say, "Hey, we're God's people. He's not going to do anything to us. We're not in trouble. We don't have to be concerned. Why should it bother us? We're God's people." That's what's going on. There's the action. There's the story. Between the story and the moral is the part of the verse in Micah 6 in verse 8 that says, "What does the Lord require of you?" The word require there is a word that says He is searching for and expecting to find. He demands this. He wants it. This is what He's waiting for. He's sitting back and saying, "Okay, here." So what is the verse saying? The verse says, "I've shown you what's good. Now, I'm going to wait. Now I'm going to expect. Now I'm looking. Now I'm seeking." What are you seeking for? The moral of the story. The moral of the story. Micah was talking to these people and telling them, here's what's going on. Now the Lord's going to send Nineveh after you, and Assyria, that is coming after you. Babylon, that is coming after you. They're going to take you into captivity. You've messed up. But He'll bring you back. He'll bring you back because Micah is the one in chapter 5 who talks about the one coming to Bethlehem as the Messiah of the people. But right now, you're in trouble. The moral of the story is God says, "I'm looking for this good." What is it? Well, you know the text. It's 3 things. Do justly, love mercy, walk humbly. God said, "I've shown you what is good. Now I'm expecting it. Here's what I'm looking for." The moral of the story is this: do justly, love mercy, walk humbly. This is the moral for all time. This is the moral that God is looking for us through all time. Old time, our time. Notice, if you will, do justly. Do justly. This idea is expect that everyone will do what is right. It is the honoring of a standard that says this is what's right. God laid it down in the Old Testament. The word used here for justly is the same word used in Exodus 21, verse 1. When God gave the law to Moses, He said, "I have laid before the people my judgments." To do justly is to say, we expect everyone to do what's right. That's what we do. We expect people to do what's right. And it is the right thing to do to expect them to do what is right. The New Covenant says the same thing. Jesus prefigured it. Even though He lived under the old, He established the principle again for the new by saying in John 7, verse 24, "Judge righteous judgment. Do not judge according to appearance." Expect that everyone will do right, but make sure that the right is based upon the standard. We have to do justly. We need to call people to a standard that God has already laid down. There is right and there is wrong, and we should expect that people will avoid the wrong and do the right. And when people do what is good, we should support it. And when people do what is evil, we should stand against it. Do justly. How can we as people of God be good if we are not also just? Number 2, love mercy. Love mercy. Now God says, when you do justly, you admit that there's a standard and everybody should live by it. But love mercy. You know why? Because not everybody lives by it perfectly. In fact, none of us does. Not one of us lives spotlessly before God. Hosea 6 and verse 6 used the phrase, I will have mercy, not sacrifice. In Matthew 9, Jesus goes and he calls Matthew the tax collector to be one of his apostles. And he ends up having a meal with him and a bunch of his tax collector friends. They're all sitting around eating. And of course, these despised workers, the Pharisees, are looking at him, and they said to his disciples, they're sort of mumbling to themselves, really, he's eating with sinners? And Jesus said, you go and you learn what this means. I will have mercy, not sacrifice. For I've not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. These people didn't know what mercy was. Jesus did. He sat there with the tax collectors. Obviously, because they wanted to learn. They wanted maybe to be better. These Pharisees were not giving them the chance. And in their high and mighty attitude, they did not have mercy. Number 3, walk humbly before your God. When David was caught in his sin with Bathsheba, he wrote Psalm 51 as his psalm of penitence. And in verses 16 and 17, he said, if you liked sacrifices, I would give them. You do not desire burnt offerings, but you desire a contrite heart, O God. James would say in James 4 and verse 10, humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord. He will lift you up. Humility says, there is a standard justly. None of us does it perfectly, mercy. But I admit that there is the standard that I'm going to put myself under and let God do what is right with me. In justice or justly, I call others to be right. In mercy, I admit that not everyone is right all the time. But in humility, I say, I want to be right, Lord. And I put myself at your service so that you can make me right. But now I want to go back to the problem of the story in Micah. Chapter 3, verse 11. We're his people. He's not going to do anything to us. The problem is, sometimes we have the very same attitude. You know why? Because we are members of the Lord's church. We assemble on the first day of the week. We get involved in projects. We have times of fellowship. And in some way, maybe, therefore, we're just all right. He's not going to do anything to us. The Jews had this attitude. Just go offer a sacrifice. Just go offer a lamb and things will be good. Maybe our attitude sometimes is, just go pray. Just go sing a song. Just go to a fellowship activity. Just show up in a Bible class. Everything will be fine. God overlooks. God forgets. Nothing bad's going to happen. The problem is the moral of my story, the moral of your story has not yet been written. We're in the process of writing it, but it's not been written. And the attitude that produced the problem there that Micah had to address was the self-righteous attitude that God's not watching me. He holds nothing against me. I can do what I want. I'm okay. But He wants us always to be in self-examination form. My brother had a business partner. And a number of years ago, they were doing work overseas, traveling together. And he took advantage of the opportunity to talk to him about his soul, using his studies, and by the way, using the stuff that we have online. And here's another aside. Last week, we had a visitor here. First time I've ever heard it happen, who came for the purpose of saying, I've been watching you all, the stuff that you have online, and I just wanted to come and experience this place in person. So they were here. So there is stuff happening out there that we don't even know about. So through all of that, he immersed his business partner into Christ. Now here's the cool story. Just this year, he was doing his family genealogy. And he found that his family were involved in the establishment and the creation of, I think it was, I'm not sure of the name of it now, but it was right on the state line Church of Christ near Mayfield, Kentucky. Back in the 1800s, 1900s. His family, he didn't even know it. Well, I was in Mayfield where Aubrey lives, and he said, can you go find that church and find that cemetery? It's a cool place. It's old, fixed up, but it is on the state line. The road, the church building, and half the cemetery is in Kentucky. The other half of the cemetery is in Tennessee. Back and forth, back and forth. That's what it is. And I was able to get pictures of the headstones of his family who were instrumental in the creation of the Church of Christ, started in that county 150 years ago. You know what? The moral of their stories are recorded on those headstones like they all are. And through the years, they have this man in their lineage connected to them spiritually, though they've never met him. But one day, they will. The moral of our story is still being written. Micah said to Israel, you're in trouble, but it can change. It doesn't have to be, but you can't keep that self-righteous attitude. The moral of the story, wouldn't it be great on a tombstone for someone to say, he or she was just, merciful, and humble. That's the moral of their story. Forever set. Or, in the words of Jesus, the moral of my story and yours could be, come, you blessed of my Father. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Or it could be, depart from me, you cursed, into everlasting darkness. The moral of the story. What does the Lord require of you? He's shown you what is good. Do justly. Love mercy. Walk humbly before your God. As we continue to live the action story of our own lives, may this be the moral, the end, the thing that you want people to learn from your story when they are telling it after we are gone. Today, while you write your story, does it include Jesus? Does your story include born this date, reborn of the water and Spirit this date? If not, you still have a chance. The story's still being written. But the warning to you is the same to Israel. Destruction is coming if you don't do it. Why wait? And if the moral of your story needs to change for the better, we're here to help. Let's stand and sing together.